Hey everybody, how you doing? I have a treat for you today because I have a treat for me today. How Emotions Work in Humans and Computers has been released on Audible.com. Now you can get a free copy if you use our affiliate link, which is audibletrial.com/IamSpirituality. So if you want to take a listen to it for free, if you already don't have an account with Audible, just go to audibletrial.com/IamSpirituality and sign up there. You'll get a free book, which you can use to download How Emotions Work in Humans and Computers, which if you're a developer, you would love all of. If you're just a regular human being looking to understand our emotions and what creates pain and suffering within us, you're going to love the first two portions of the book, and you can read the third portion for interest's sake. But go check it out. And for this episode, I am going to give you a sneak peek and play an entire chapter, and I think this is the introduction that we've got. And so with no further ado, here is one of the first chapters in How Emotions Work in Humans and Computers. Section 1. Chapter 1. Starting from the known science of fear. I hate quotations. Tell me what you know. Ralph Waldo Emerson, poet. Our first step starts with taking an actual human emotion and using it to model how it works logically. To give us a common base for discussion, let's review what we presume to know about the emotion of fear and peek at how the process of the mind's creation of fear reveals the mind's process for creating all other emotions. It is widely accepted that fear is an evolutionary development of the limbic system that aids in prolonging life. A bear walks out of the woods 20 feet in front of us. The lungs inflate, the irises contract, conscious attention is acutely focused, adrenaline starts to spill into our bloodstream, we poop in our pants a little bit. And as our body is prepped for a fight or flight response, our waking consciousness is also urged into a similar path. Defend or get the hell out of there. This type of unconscious reaction is classified by psychology and neurobiology as the genetic effect of preparedness. It is thought to have been bred into our physiology through natural selection, since it is presumed that organisms with a better fear response probably survived longer and went on to mate. This process of fear generation, as seen from a 50,000-foot view, occurs thusly. The limbic system constantly scans and analyzes the environment through the senses for things that do not meet the mind's expectation or preference of that environment, and when something is identified outside of expectation or preference and is perceived as a threat, fear is generated. This is not a new idea. The understanding of this process is accepted science, and the definition of fear proves to be accurate in anecdotal and study examples pretty much 100% of the time in a healthy mind. That said, the secret to understanding all emotions, not just fear, lies in the further breakdown and modeling of what we understand about the fear process and how that process can be modeled on a piece of paper. So let's start with creating that model. Chapter 2. What fear reveals about a standard equation of emotion. In the process of the limbic brain constantly scanning the environment for perceived threats, the scanning the environment part can be classified as a conscious or unconscious perception. Perception is, of course, our brain's processing of reality and or the misprocessing of reality to create a perceived reality that does not exist. Take, for example, what happens when someone gets elected to public office. That causes a total separation from reality. We will call this first variable reality as perceived, RP. Next, the analyzing for threat portion is also part of the brain's perception process, but this single operation of external threat analysis invites another variable into the equation. Why? Because when threat levels are analyzed, an additional question must then be asked. This is a threat to what exactly? In the case of fear, the answer to that question is that threats are analyzed versus the self. From an unconscious limbic system perspective, self is primarily defined as everything within the confines of our skin, our physical existence. But as we will soon see, there is a better definition and modeling of self that is accurate in its representation of how our minds work, and that is also useful in explaining dozens of individual emotions. But staying with the task of modeling fear for a moment, it seems that our second variable of fear could be considered self, or even sense of self, right? Threats in our environment need to be measured versus our sense of self. Well, yes and no. In reality, because the brain actually works as an engine of processing perceptions versus expectations, and quoting from Incognito, The Secret Lives of the Brain by David Eagleman, perception reflects on the act of comparison of sensory inputs to internal prediction. And this gives us a way to understand a bigger concept. Awareness of your surroundings occurs only when the sensory inputs violate expectations. When the world is successfully predicted away, awareness is not needed. And that ends the quote of leading neuroscientist David Eagleman. So, because the brain actually works as an engine of processing perceptions versus expectations, we should actually define the second variable as expectation and/or preference regarding self, which fits with current research and which will be extremely useful in explaining all other emotions besides fear. This second variable we will call expectation and/or preference regarding self, EP. And so from this 50,000-foot view, the brain's generic process for creating fear can now be shown as a simple equation. The equation of emotion, EP, as compared to RP, equals ER. And if you're writing this down on a piece of paper, it's EP difference RP equals ER. The difference symbol comes from set theory. It looks like the delta sign, but it's not. The equation means expectation and/or preference as compared to reality as perceived creates an emotional reaction. Moving forward, since this same equation is used to explain all specific emotions, we will call this equation the Webb equation of emotion, or equation of emotion, or EOE for short. We will note that this isn't the first time that there have been attempts in the past to create equations of emotion, thus the need for the Webb discriminator. Regarding fear, the Webb equation of emotion models fear as the emotional response that is presented in any situation where a person's RP, the perception within their mind, presents a differing threat level than is expected and/or preferred by their EP. This is exactly how existing science sees fear. We now just have a new way of modeling it. A couple details before moving on. Okay, so what determines an individual's expectation and/or preference, their EP, regarding their sense of self? Well, much of it is determined naturally. The specific EP for threat levels to self is determined by the physiological evolution bred into us by the way of natural selection. In almost all cases, the expectation and/or preference, the EP, in a healthy mind can be assumed to be that a low or zero level of threat exists. After all, a low or zero threat level is the best environment for continued survival, at least from the body's perspective. Now, while the body's unconscious influence on the EP may be obviously simple, this simple EP pattern will come in handy when discussing the specifics of dozens of other emotions. In fact, we will soon see how this one process is used by the brain to create all emotional responses in almost all situations, based on an unbending rule set associated with equation variables specific to each emotion. On our way to explaining all those individual emotions, we're going to dig just a little deeper into the EP to better understand our sense of self. The sense of self modeling within the human mind is a critical determinant of how a large number of specific emotions are processed. Summary of the last couple of chapters. The known science of fear reveals it can be modeled into a basic equation of emotion. Expectation and/or preference regarding self, EP, compared to reality as perceived, RP, creates the emotional reaction. The EP is relative to a person's self, and the EP regarding self is influenced by evolution and the processing of the limbic system. The RP is a person's perception of reality, influenced by the brain. We will soon see how this same equation actually explains the creation of all individual emotions. Hey, wasn't that awesome? So now I know you want to go listen to the rest of it, so go do so. Audible.com, and you can get it for free, audibletrial.com/IamSpirituality. Hope things are well for you guys. Talk to you next week. Peace.